My daughter took my ex-wife and her stepdad to meet her fiancé's family without me. You're an embarrassment, she said. I whispered, I understand. The next morning, they all burst into my house, demanding answers, and when her fiancé saw me, he said one sentence that left everyone frozen. Hey, Reddit. My daughter was engaged and planning a wedding. She excluded me from meeting her fiancé's family because apparently I wasn't good enough. She took her stepdad instead. What happened next? Absolute chaos. She never imagined I'd react the way I did. Name's Jace, 50 male. I've been a union electrician for 28 years. IBW Local 364 out of Rockford, Illinois. My place was a modest ranch off Alpine Road. Bought it after the divorce 12 years ago when Vivian decided her yoga instructor understood her soul better than I did. Wesley was some trust fund kid who'd never worked a real job in his life. They got married about 18 months after our divorce finalized. My daughter Brooke was 14 at the time, old enough to understand what happened, young enough to get her head twisted around by a guy who bought her affection with credit cards and empty promises. It was the Monday before Thanksgiving, when my life started rewiring itself. Rockford was doing that late November thing where the sky sits on your shoulders like a wet blanket. I'd finished a job on East State Street, rewiring an old storefront that smelled like mildew and the ghost of whatever failed business died there before. My hands still carried that familiar scent of copper and insulation tape when I pulled into my driveway. I walked through my front door and dropped my tool bag. The house was quiet, just me and the ticking of the clock. I made coffee the old-fashioned way, and I was scrolling through my phone when I saw the text from Brooke. She wanted to stop by Wednesday with her fiancé Connor after they got back from somewhere. I texted back asking where they'd gone. The reply took long. Madison, meeting Connor's family. I stared at that for a second. Madison wasn't far. An hour and a half, maybe 2 with traffic, but it was far enough that you make plans. Pack a bag, coordinate schedules. I asked if I was coming along, because that's what you do when your daughter gets engaged. You show up, shake hands with her fiancé's family. Her reply came back too fast this time. Just Mom and Wesley are coming. Something cold slid through my chest. Not anger yet? I asked why. Connor's family is traditional. It's just easier this way? Easier. What do you mean? I mean, I don't want to be embarrassed. Can you not make it a big deal, please? Embarrassed. Right. I typed out 3 different responses and deleted all of them. Then I just sent back, got it. I sat at my kitchen table drinking coffee that was getting cold and tried to figure out when I became the inconvenient parent, the one you hide from polite company, the one whose existence needs to be explained away or simplified out of the narrative. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my brother Ricky. He worked at a body shop on the south side and had a sixth sense for when something was wrong. His text was simple. Yo, what's up, brother? Sup? You good? I told him I'd call him later. That night I didn't sleep much. Kept staring at the ceiling thinking about all the years I'd shown up. Every child support payment made on time. Every birthday. Every holiday pickup and drop-off. The car I co-signed when Brooke was 19 and needed reliable transportation. The semester abroad I helped fund when Vivian claimed she couldn't cover it. The emergency appendectomy when she was 16. And I sat in that hospital waiting room for 6 hours while Vivian and Wesley were conveniently unreachable at some spa retreat. 26 years of being her father. And I wasn't even worth a seat at the table. The betrayal arrived on Facebook the next morning at 7:15, right about the time I was pouring my first cup of coffee and wondering if it was too early to feel this old. I was scrolling through notifications when I saw it. The photo had been posted late the night before. Brooke in a dress coat with her hair done up, smiling like she just won the lottery. Vivian beside her, looking smug in that way she always did. And Wesley on the other side, arm around my daughter's shoulder, grinning like an a-hole. They were standing in front of some upscale restaurant in Madison. String lights, exposed brick, the kind of place that charges $40 for a steak. The caption punched me in the gut. Family dinner with my parents before the big meeting tomorrow. So grateful for my amazing dad and the love he's shown me. Dad. She called Wesley her dad. After I'd spent 26 years. 2.5 decades of being the one whose blood ran through her veins. And I was watching her publicly declare her stepfather as her dad while I sat alone in my kitchen, like a ghost who hadn't figured out he was dead yet. My phone rang. Ricky. You see it? Your daughter, he asked without preamble. I told him yeah. That's messed up, Jace. That's genuinely messed up. I didn't disagree. Ricky was quiet for a second. Then he said something that stuck with me. You know what the worst part is? She posted that knowing you'd see it. That's not a mistake. He was right. Brooke wasn't stupid. She'd inherited her mother's talent for cruelty, wrapped in plausible deniability. She could always claim she didn't mean it that way, that I was being sensitive, that I was reading too much into things. I told Ricky I'd call him back and hung up. I texted Brooke one message only. Since Wesley is your dad now, let him act like it. You're cut off. Then I turned the phone off and went to bed. The next morning, I heard cars in my driveway. Cars. I looked out the window to see Brooke's luxury SUV parked behind Vivian's Mercedes. The whole crew had assembled. Brooke, Vivian, and Wesley himself, looking smug as ever in a cashmere coat. Nothing says family emergency like showing up in two luxury vehicles to confront your father about his feelings. They didn't knock. Brooke still had a key from when she used to stay with me on weekends. She walked in like she owned the place, the other two trailing behind her. Vivian scanned my kitchen with that look, mentally cataloging everything that wasn't up to her standards. Wesley positioned himself near the door. Vivian spoke first. She always did. Jace, we need to talk. I stayed seated at my kitchen table, coffee in hand, phone still showing Facebook. Do we? Brooke pushed forward. You saw the post. Before you make this into some huge thing. Some huge thing, I repeated. You called Wesley your dad. Publicly. To the entire internet. Wesley stepped up with that smile of his. Jace, I understand you're feeling hurt. I held up a hand. Let me stop you right there. You don't get to talk about this situation. Apparently, you're the preferred parent in my daughter's life. So congrats. Start acting like it. His smile faltered slightly. Vivian's eyes went sharp. This is exactly what I mean, Brooke said. This attitude. This is why I didn't want you there. What attitude? The one where I exist, where I have opinions, where I'm not just a walking checkbook you tap when you need something? Vivian's voice came ice cold. Nobody said that. You didn't have to say it. Actions speak, Vivian. You took your husband and my daughter to meet her fiancé's family and introduced Wesley as her father. So what did you tell them about me? That I'm a roommate? Some guy who funds your daughter's lifestyle and occasionally shows up at holidays? Silence. I looked at Brooke. What exactly did you tell Connor's parents about me? She didn't answer. Brooke. Her jaw tightened. The Hartleys don't do divorce mess, okay? They're traditional. Old money. Mom told them you were basically out of the picture. It was easier. There it was. Easier, I repeated. So you erased 26 years of me being your father because it was easier. It's not erasure. It's just presentation. It's a lie, Brooke. A lie you told to your future in-laws about who raised you. She rolled her eyes. Biologically, sure, but fatherhood is more than DNA. She crossed her arms and looked me dead in the eyes. You never acted like a real father, Jace. The words landed like a sledgehammer to the chest. I stood there for a long moment. Okay, I whispered. I got it. Brooke blinked, almost surprised I didn't fight back. Vivian exchanged a glance with Wesley. The room went quiet. Wesley cleared his throat. The Hartley family has certain expectations. Don't care. He stopped mid-sentence. Vivian stepped in. You're making this more dramatic than it needs to be. No. I stood up slowly. I'm done. We came here to make peace, she said through her teeth. You came here because Brooke wants something. Brooke's voice turned sharp. What does that even mean? I looked at my daughter, tried to see the little girl who used to run to me when I got home from work. The teenager who cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke up with her. The young woman who called me in a panic when her car broke down on I-90 and I drove 2 hours in a snowstorm to help her. All I saw was a stranger in expensive clothes who'd learned to treat people like disposable commodities. Someone who'd been taught that image mattered more than anything else. It means the gravy train just hit the end of the line, I said. Brooke's face paled. What are you talking about? The account I set up for you. The one I've been putting money into since you were 3 years old. The one I told you was for emergencies and your wedding someday. I paused. I closed it first thing this morning, before you even got here. Her jaw dropped. You did what? Vivian's eyes went wide. Have you lost your mind? You can't do that. Already did. That money was for Brooke. It was my money. Saved for my daughter. And apparently I'm not her father. She can forget about it. Brooke finally found her voice. How much was in there? I told her. The number hung in the air. Wesley whistled low. That's substantial. 23 years of contributions. Compound interest. Brooke's face had gone from pale to red. You can't just take that. It's mine. Watch me. I need that money for the wedding. Then ask your dad. I let that land. Your real dad, apparently. Wesley. I'm sure he can cover it. Wesley's face tightened. Vivian looked like she wanted to slap me. Brooke was shaking now. You're going to regret this. I shrugged. Maybe, but at least I'll regret it with my savings account intact and my self-respect still in one piece. She stormed to her car. Vivian followed, already on her phone. Wesley lingered for a moment. He looked at me with something that might have been respect or might have been pure hatred. Hard to tell. "You know this isn't over," he said. I smiled at him. "It is." He walked away without another word. I went back to my garage and finished organizing my tools. Ricky called that night. I told him what happened. He laughed. "About time," he said when he recovered. "I've been waiting years for you to do that." I told him it felt good. "It should. You've been letting them walk all over you since the divorce. Jace, you're not a mean guy, but you gotta stop being such an easy target." He was right. I'd spent so long trying to be the bigger person that I'd let myself become a doormat. No more. He showed up at my place the next day with drinks and a look on his face like he'd just gotten front row seats to a boxing match. "So word is spreading," he said, dropping onto my couch. "Vivian's been calling everyone trying to figure out if there's any legal way to get that money back." I raised an eyebrow. "There isn't." "I know that, but watching her scramble is entertainment value alone." He cracked open a drink and handed me one. "Word is, she's already burned through 3 lawyers trying to find a loophole. There isn't one." That tracked with what I expected. Vivian always thought rules were suggestions for other people. "Here's the thing," Ricky continued. "You've got leverage now. The Hartleys are old money. They don't like being lied to. If they find out the truth about how you were painted..." I thought about it. "I'm not trying to blow up Brooke's wedding. Brother, she already did that herself. You're just deciding whether to hand her a fire extinguisher or let it burn." 2 weeks later, my phone rang. Unknown number. A woman's voice, polite and careful. She introduced herself as Judith Hartley, Connor's mother. She said she'd heard some things. Conflicting things. And she wanted to get the full picture before her family made any decisions about the wedding. I asked her what she'd been told. There was a pause. Then she said they'd been told I was largely absent during Brooke's childhood, that Wesley had been the stable presence, that the divorce had been due to my issues. I sat down on my couch. "Mrs. Hartley, I've been working as an electrician for 28 years to provide for my daughter. Same job, same union. I've never missed a child support payment. I was at every custody exchange, every holiday I was legally entitled to, every school event I could get to. I have receipts for the car I co-signed, the tuition I helped pay, the medical bills I covered. Would you like copies?" Silence on the other end. "That's not what we were told," she finally said. "I'm sure it wasn't." Another pause. "Mr. Hollis, would you be willing to meet with us? My husband and I would like to hear your side of things. In person." I thought about it for a few seconds. "When and where?" We agreed to meet. Ricky showed up at my house the Sunday before the meeting with a legal pad. "All right," he said, settling into the chair. "Let's go through this. What do you actually have?" I'd spent the week gathering paperwork. Not for revenge, at least not primarily. More for clarity. We spread everything across the kitchen table. Child support records going back to the divorce. Bank statements showing the education fund I'd contributed to. Medical receipts. The co-signing documents for Brooke's first car. Report cards with my signature alongside Vivian's. Photos from birthdays, holidays, school events. Ricky flipped through a stack of photos. "You were at her high school graduation? 3rd row. Got there early to get a good seat." He held up a picture of Brooke in her cap and gown. Me standing next to her, both of us smiling. "This is 2 years after Vivian remarried. You were still coming to everything?" I never stopped. He set the photo down and shook his head. "And they told the Hartleys you were absent? Man, I'm so freaking angry." "It's all right. I've got the receipts." Ricky made a sound of disgust. "Vivian always was good at rewriting history. Remember when she told everyone the divorce was because you worked too much? Conveniently left out the part where she was sleeping with Wesley. I didn't want to rehash old wounds. That's not what this is about." "Maybe it should be. These people lied about you, Jace. They're still lying. And they're using those lies to cut you out of your own daughter's wedding." I looked at the piles of paper on my table. 26 years of evidence that I'd been there, that I'd tried, that I'd never stopped being a father, even when it would have been easier to walk away. "The Hartleys seem like reasonable people," I said. Judith sounded genuinely confused on the phone, like what she'd been told didn't match what she was seeing. "What do you mean?" She said Connor mentioned me a few times. Said I seemed like a normal guy when they met briefly at some engagement party. But Brooke and Vivian's story painted me as some deadbeat who barely existed. The math didn't add up for her. Ricky nodded. "So she's doing her own fact-checking." "Looks like it." "Smart woman." He pulled out his legal pad. "Okay, what do you want out of this meeting?" I thought about it. I didn't want to blow up Brooke's wedding. I wanted something simpler. I want them to know the truth. What they do with it is up to them. Ricky wrote something down. Fair enough, but you should also be ready for blowback. When Brooke finds out you talk to the Hartleys directly, she's going to lose it. Let her. He looked at me. You sure? This is your daughter. She stopped being my daughter when she called another man dad. I'm just the guy who donated the genetic material at this point. Ricky was quiet for a moment. Then he put down his pen. I've known you my whole life. You're not a vindictive person. I'm not being vindictive. I'm being honest. There's a difference. Ricky cracked open a drink. All right, let's prep your talking points. We spent the next 2 hours going through everything. By the time he left, I had a simple folder with the most relevant documents and a clear idea of what I wanted to say. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday evening. The Hartleys had suggested a neutral location, a conference room at their church. Ricky offered to come as backup. I told him no. This was something I needed to do alone. Monday night, I got a call from Brooke. First time she'd contacted me since the driveway confrontation. Her voice was tight. I hear you've been talking to Connor's mother. I didn't ask how she knew. Didn't matter. She reached out to me, asked questions. I answered. What did you tell her? The truth. Silence. Then, you had no right. I had every right. You told them lies about me, Brooke. I corrected the record. This is going to ruin everything. No. The lies were going to ruin everything eventually. Her voice went cold. You're going to regret this. You keep saying that. Hasn't come true yet. She hung up without saying goodbye. I slept fine that night. Better than I had in weeks, actually. Fast forward to the meeting day. The church conference room smelled like lemon cleaner and old hymnals. Folding chairs arranged around a long table. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A coffee urn in the corner that had probably been making the same mediocre coffee since the Carter administration. I got there 15 minutes early, set my folder on the table, and took a seat near the middle. Not at the head. This wasn't my show. Just somewhere I could be seen and heard clearly. The Hartleys arrived next. Judith was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of posture that suggested she'd spent her life in boardrooms. Her husband Henry was shorter, stockier, with calloused hands that told me he'd done real work at some point in his life. They shook my hand and sat across from me. Thank you for coming, Judith said. I know this is unconventional. I told her I appreciated the opportunity to set the record straight. Connor came in next, looking nervous. He nodded at me and sat next to his mother. Kid wasn't the enemy here. He'd just gotten fed bad information, and then the rest of them arrived. Brooke walked in first, her face arranged in that careful blankness she'd learned from her mother. Vivian followed, already projecting wounded dignity like a weapon. Wesley brought up the rear, cashmere coat replaced with a more understated blazer, playing humble for the audience. The three of them took seats on the opposite side of the table. Brooke positioned herself as far from me as possible. Henry cleared his throat. We're here to clarify some things before moving forward with wedding plans. Judith spoke with Mr. Hollis last week. What she learned didn't match what we'd been told. We want to give everyone a chance to explain. Vivian opened her mouth, but Henry held up a hand. We'll start with Mr. Hollis. I looked around the table, every eye on me. The moment felt heavy, but not in a bad way. More like setting down a load I'd been carrying too long. I've been Brooke's father for 26 years, I said. I was married to Vivian for 14 of those years, divorced for 12. During the marriage, I worked. I provided. I was there for birthdays, holidays, school events. After the divorce, I followed the custody agreement to the letter. I never missed a payment, never missed a pickup, never missed an opportunity to be part of my daughter's life. I opened my folder, laid out the documents one by one. This is my child support record, complete and uninterrupted for 12 years. This is the loan paperwork from when I co-signed her first car. I wasn't unavailable. I was the one she called. This is a hospital bill from when she was 16 and had emergency surgery. I sat in that waiting room for 6 hours. I added the graduation photo to the pile. This is from her high school graduation, 3rd row. I took the day off work. And this, I pulled out the final document. This is the statement from the savings account I set up for her when she was 3 years old. 23 years of contributions. I closed it 2 weeks ago because I was told I wasn't her real father. The room was silent. Judith studied the documents. Henry's expression had gone from neutral to something closer to anger. Connor stared at Brooke. Is this true? Brooke's jaw was tight. He's exaggerating. I shook my head. Which part? The child support records from the county? The bank statements with dates and amounts? The hospital receipt with my signature? Wesley stepped forward. Financial contributions don't make someone a parent. Being present emotionally. I was present emotionally, I cut him off. I was present physically. I was present in every way a father can be present. You showed up when Brooke was 14 with a leased car and a trust fund. You bought her affection. I earned mine. His face darkened. Vivian's voice went sharp. This is exactly why we didn't want you there. This inability to accept that Brooke has relationships with other people. I looked at her. I accepted that she had a stepfather. I never tried to undermine your marriage or Wesley's relationship with Brooke, but you didn't just build him up. You tore me down. You told these people I was absent, that I wasn't really involved. That's erasure. Judith spoke quietly. We were told Jace was essentially a stranger, that he showed up occasionally but wasn't part of Brooke's daily life. She looked at Vivian. Vivian looked at the table. Connor stood up, his chair scraping loudly. I specifically asked you about Brooke's biological father. You said he wasn't in the picture. Brooke's composure finally cracked. He was barely in the picture. Every other weekend isn't being a parent. Every other weekend was what the court gave me, I said. I asked for more. Your mother's lawyer made sure I didn't get it. Vivian's face went red. That's a lie. Check the court records. Connor was still standing. He looked at Brooke, then at Vivian, then back at Brooke. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, the kind of calm that comes right before everything breaks. So you lied about your father to make your family look better? Everyone froze. Brooke's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Vivian's face went white. Wesley looked at the floor. The silence stretched until it hurt. Henry turned to his son. Connor, we need to talk. Privately. Connor nodded. He looked at Brooke, and I saw something shift in his expression. Disappointment. The kind that comes when you realize the person you thought you knew is a stranger. He walked out with his parents. The door closed behind them. And then it was just us. Me, Brooke, Vivian, and Wesley. Brooke spoke first, her voice shaking. Are you happy now? You ruined everything. I gathered my documents back into the folder. If the truth ruins things, that's not my fault. You had no right. I had every right. Wesley stepped forward. You need to think about what you're doing here, Jace. Family disputes can be resolved, but if you blow this up, it's already blown up. You three lit the fuse. I'm just not letting you blame me for the explosion. Vivian stood, gathering her purse. We'll see about that. This isn't over. I shrugged. For me, it is. They left. Brooke didn't look back. I sat alone in that room for another 10 minutes, listening to the fluorescent lights buzz and the coffee urn gurgle. Then I packed up my folder and went home. The next 3 weeks were chaos. Not my chaos. Theirs. I just watched it unfold from a comfortable distance. Ricky kept me updated through his grapevine. The Hartleys had gone into full investigation mode after the church meeting. They'd verified everything I told them. The child support records. The bank statements. The graduation photos. The wedding wasn't canceled. It was postponed indefinitely while Connor and Brooke worked through some things. That was the official statement. Unofficially, according to Ricky's grapevine, Connor was seriously reconsidering whether he wanted to marry someone who'd lied to his family about something so fundamental. Vivian called me 5 times in the first week. I didn't answer. She left voicemails that started angry and gradually shifted to panic. Jace, we need to talk about this. For Brooke's sake, the wedding is at risk. Whatever issues we have, we can work through them. But you need to call the Hartleys and explain that you overreacted. Please. I ignored it. Wesley didn't call. Probably smart on his part. Brooke reached out exactly once, through email. A long message that went from blame to self-pity. I was ungrateful for everything she'd done for me. I didn't understand how hard it had been growing up between 2 households. Wesley had been more present during her formative teenage years. She never meant to hurt me. She just made choices that happened to have that effect. The closest she came to accountability was one line near the end. I understand now that some of my decisions were hurtful, and I regret the pain they caused. Not, I'm sorry I lied about you. Not, I was wrong to erase you from my life. I read it twice, trying to find any actual acknowledgement of what she'd done, any recognition that she'd lied about me, any hint of genuine remorse. Nothing. I sent back a 2-sentence reply. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about what happened, I'm willing to listen. Until then, I don't have anything to say. She didn't respond. Ricky came over on the 3rd Friday. We sat on my back porch even though it was cold enough that we could see our breath. Word is the Hartleys are pulling out of the wedding funding, he said. They were going to cover the venue and catering. Now they're not. I nodded. That's a lot of money. 50 grand or so, apparently. Judith told someone at their church that she couldn't in good conscience fund a marriage that started with deception. Exact words. I let that sink in. The Hartleys weren't just stepping back. They were making a statement. Guess Wesley's trust fund is going to take a hit, I said. Ricky grinned. That's the thing. There's not as much in that trust fund as everyone thought. Vivian's been bleeding it dry for years. The house, the cars, the lifestyle, it's mostly smoke and mirrors at this point. I processed that. So Brooke's fancy wedding was being funded by the Hartleys, and now that money's gone. Yep, and the savings account you closed would have covered the gap. Without either one? He shook his head. They're scrambling. I took a long sip of my drink. Life comes at you fast. Brother, you ain't kidding. The following week, Vivian's sister reached out to me. Aunt Paula, a reasonable woman I'd always gotten along with during the marriage. She asked if we could meet for coffee. Said she wanted to understand what happened from my perspective. I agreed because Paula had never wronged me, and she seemed genuinely confused rather than accusatory. We met at a diner on the south side. She looked tired, like she'd been caught in the middle of something exhausting. I talked to Vivian, she said. I've also talked to the Hartleys. The stories don't match. I told her I wasn't surprised. I can't believe Vivian actually claimed you were absent. You've done everything a father could for his daughter. She paused. Jace, I've known my sister my whole life. She has a talent for making herself the victim in every story. But this? I didn't realize how far it had gone. I didn't gloat, just told her the facts. Paula listened. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. What happens now? That's up to them. I've said what I had to say. The truth is out there. If they want to rebuild something with me, they know where to find me. And if they don't? I shrugged. Then I keep living my life. I've spent too many years waiting for people to appreciate me. I'm done waiting. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have seen it sooner. I told her it wasn't her fault. And I meant it. 3 months later, I was in my garage replacing a starter on my truck when a car pulled into my driveway. I didn't recognize the vehicle, but I recognized the man who got out. Connor looked different than the last time I'd seen him. Less polished, more worn. I wiped my hands on a rag and met him at the edge of the garage. Mr. Hollis, got a few minutes? Yeah, sure. We sat on the tailgate of my truck, neither of us in a hurry to fill the silence. Early March cold still had some bite to it, but the sun was out and the wind wasn't too bad. Connor spoke first. The wedding's off. Pause. I nodded. I heard rumors. Yeah, word gets around. He stared at the ground. I kept trying to make it work. Kept telling myself everyone has complicated family stuff, right? Nobody's perfect. That's fair. But it wasn't just complicated. She lied. And when I started looking into it, really looking, it got worse. The stuff about you was just the beginning. I waited. The semester abroad she said her mom paid for? That was you. The car her dad supposedly bought her? You co-signed the loan? The medical emergency where Wesley saved the day? He wasn't even in the country. You were the one who was there. Sounds like you did your homework. I had to. Because every time I tried to talk to Brooke about it, she deflected. Changed the subject. Made me feel like I was the problem for asking questions. I knew that move. I'd been on the receiving end of it for years. Connor shook his head. The thing that really got me was how easy it was for her. The lying. It wasn't even reluctant. She just rewrote reality like it was nothing and expected me to go along with it. That skill runs in the family. He almost smiled. My mother said something similar. We sat in silence for another minute. What are you going to do now? I asked. Focus on work. Figure out who I am without her. It's been 8 months of my life built around wedding planning and family merging. Feels weird to just stop. I understood that. The disorientation of suddenly having space where obligation used to be. Connor nodded slowly. You know what? My parents like you. My mom said you remind her of my grandfather. Straightforward. What you see is what you get. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. He stood up, brushed off his pants. We shook hands. Thanks for taking the time, he said. No problem. Good luck, son. He drove off, and I went back to my truck starter. The update on Brooke came through Ricky a few weeks later. Without the Hartley money and without the savings I'd closed, the wedding would have been impossible anyway. But that wasn't the only fallout. Vivian and Wesley's finances, already strained, took another hit when some of his investments went sideways. Turned out Wesley had been playing fast and loose with what was left of his trust fund, chasing returns he couldn't afford to lose. The lifestyle they'd been projecting was crumbling. There was talk of selling the big house, downsizing to something smaller. Brooke had moved back in with them, apparently. The fancy apartment she'd been renting, funded by what I now suspected was money Vivian had been siphoning from Wesley, was no longer sustainable. At 26 years old, she was back in her childhood bedroom, watching her carefully constructed image collapse around her. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, they'd looked down on my modest house, my practical truck, my simple life. Now they were learning that the foundation they'd built on wasn't as solid as they thought. Turns out character is a better investment than cashmere coats. Aunt Paula called me in April to say Vivian had been asking about me, whether I'd be willing to talk. I told Paula that I'd said everything I needed to say. The ball was in their court. But I wasn't going to pretend nothing happened just so they could feel better about themselves. She's not going to apologize, Paula warned. You know that. I knew. Vivian had never apologized for anything in her life, and Brooke had learned that skill from the master. Then we don't have anything to discuss. Paula accepted that, probably expected it. Summer came. I took a fishing trip with Ricky up to Wisconsin. Spent a week not thinking about any of it, just casting lines into a lake and enjoying the quiet. When I got back, there was a letter in my mailbox. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Brooks. I debated not opening it. The mature thing might have been to read it with an open heart, look for the apology, rebuild the bridge. But I'd spent 26 years being mature, being the bigger person, being patient. I read it anyway. It was 3 pages long. Most of it was explanation without apology. She'd been confused. She'd been caught between 2 families, etc. I put the letter in a drawer. Maybe I'd respond someday. Maybe I wouldn't, but I wasn't in a hurry. In October, I got a new apprentice at work. Kid named Tyler, 22 years old, eager to learn the trade. He reminded me of myself at that age. Showing up early, staying late, not complaining when the work got hard. One day over lunch, he asked if I had any kids. I took a bite of my sandwich and considered the question. I have a daughter, I said finally, but we're not close. He nodded like that made sense. Didn't push for details. Smart kid. That night, I sat on my back porch as the sun went down. That clean autumn cold that reminds you winter's coming, but hasn't arrived yet. The trees in my backyard were half bare, leaves scattered across the grass I'd need to rake soon. I thought about Brooke, about Vivian and Wesley, about all the years I'd spent trying to be enough for people who'd already decided I wasn't, and I realized something that felt like peace. I'd stood up for myself. I'd refused to be treated like a ghost. Refused to be erased? Whatever happened next was out of my hands. Maybe Brooke would come around eventually. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, I was done carrying the weight of her choices. I'd spent decades being a father. Showing up, staying, holding the line when walking away would have been easier. That was enough. That had always been enough. The fact that she didn't see it wasn't my problem anymore. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.